He has already issued a record more than 200 executive orders.
Multiple cases on multiple dockets. If that individual's moved somewhere else, then in that area, they could be removed.
Let's hop into a CNN panel discussing some of the arguments the Trump administration is actually attempting to bring before a court in their hopes to end birthright citizenship, one of the more insane aspirations of the administration. So if you can, first, take a moment, leave us a like. It really helps us out. It boosts the video, so we really appreciate it, and we'll get right into the discourse.
He has already issued a record more than 200 executive orders, and they've been blocked by these injunctions 49 times. Now, today's case is specifically focused on his executive order ending birthright citizenship. So the right that if you were born in this country, even if your parents are not U.S. citizens, that you are a citizen. And the challengers argue that this is exactly why you do need one consistent policy for the entire country. So if a judge is going to block this, you don't want a patchwork, because they argue it will create chaos. And Justice Kagan, she really hammered President Trump's lawyer, John Sauer, on this issue. Let's take a listen to what she said.
How do we get to that result? Does every single person that is affected by this EO have to bring their own suit? Are there alternatives? How long does it take? How do we get to the result that there is a single rule of citizenship that is the rule that we've historically applied, rather than the rule that the EO would have us do?
The arguments they're hearing today are over whether or not the lower courts have jurisdiction to block the president from trying this on a national level, or if it only applies to like the state the court is in, something it sadly seems the conservative justices may actually side with Trump on, allowing him to effectively end birthright citizenship, at least in the states that won't bring cases potentially until it's heard by the Supreme Court. This is another position, like most of the ones the Trump administration has been running with, that doesn't make much sense any way you think of it. It's one, hard to define what being an American means in a non-white centric way if we're going to say that being born here isn't enough, which ultimately might be the goal for someone like Trump. It's also counterproductive in that we should want to grow our population, not ostracize a large portion of it that by all like cultural means would be American. And if we're talking about applying this in any retroactive manner, it's tens of millions of undocumented immigrants we're creating. If we aren't, then what makes them any less Americans than those that we're allowing to stay? There's no sense that it can make.
It really reduces to the question of whether, when the president does something that perhaps we all agree is unlawful, does every single person who's affected have to bring a lawsuit? Or at least do you have to have a series of lawsuits on behalf of classes of everyone who's affected? Or can you have one, or in this case, 3 lawsuits that tee the issue up to the Supreme Court, that give the Supreme Court a chance to say, this is unlawful, you can't do that? Everyone agrees that once the Supreme Court says this is unlawful, it's a rule for the whole country, and it's a rule that protects everybody. But the fight is over what happens until then. And it takes 2, 3, 4 years for cases to get to the Supreme Court. And so the question is, during that interim period, are we really going to make every single person bring their own case or be part of someone else's case? Or are we going to allow for these kinds of nationwide lawsuits? Dan, the reason why that matters is not just for birthright citizenship, right? So in the birthright citizenship case, you've got 22 states.
And again, if the conservative justices do side with Trump on this specific hearing, it's not saying that ending birthright citizenship is okay straight out. But if the injunctions aren't held up nationally, the reality for so many Americans is that birthright citizenship will be ended, where again, Republican states may just not bring these suits in an act of loyalty, where then in those states, this right is stripped away from you. And let's all just take a moment to reflect and think about what happened the last time that we let the states dictate our rights and what it led up to. But to me, logically, the answer is just following the judicial chain of command, where one court can take it up the ladder, the administration can take it to the Supreme Court if needed, but the Supreme Court shouldn't be the only check and balance for the president, especially in the time and manner in which it takes them to handle cases sometimes. The name federal court in and of itself should imply and would imply federal or national jurisdiction. I just don't see why that wouldn't be enough.
We already have a bit of an example as to what it would look like if there weren't these nationwide injunctions. And I'll tell you what that is. With the Alien Enemies Act, that sweeping wartime authority that the president has wanted to use to swiftly remove undocumented immigrants, We are seeing a patchwork of cases across the country because those judges have not been issuing nationwide injunctions. So I have been following multiple cases on multiple dockets, and this has become a tricky issue for all of these groups because, for example, there was a judge in one district of Texas that said, no one in my district can be removed under this authority. Except for in another district, there wasn't that ruling. So detainees were moved to that district. And then there was another emergency filing and another evening that said, no, now we need to address this. So what we've already started to see what a world like this could look like on this very particular issue because these multiple districts are ruling only for their district. So if that individual's moved somewhere else, then in that area, they could be removed.
And this is an insane thing for the Trump administration to even be fighting for, something that MAGA would have called Biden a dictator for doing. It turns the country straight up into the Wild West. It erodes any national sense of unity or formation or structure. It again, is the path that set up the Civil War. So why would we repeat that? But again, when you're the party that has never read a history book, of course, you're probably not going to care what happened in the history books. Federal courts should absolutely be able to apply their injunctions nationally. What else would a federal court be for if not federal jurisdiction? The administration can then appeal to the Supreme Court if need be. That's how it's always gone and how it works best, where it's never been an issue prior, because in no prior administration have we seen a president like Trump try to stretch the bounds of the executive so rapidly and unconstitutionally, where they feel restricted or even feel the need to raise the question of the courts trying to have to block them and they shouldn't be allowed because the courts have to work overtime with Trump to keep him within bounds of the Constitution. I mean, this is the erosion of democracy happening before all of our eyes. Our systems and institutions are falling to fascism.